Good Shabbos, good Hodesh. Today we're celebrating not only that Shabbat is coming tonight, but also that the new month, the new Hebrew month of ER begins tonight. But Rosh Hodesh, the celebration of the new month, this is a 2-day Rosh Hodesh, and so we already started that last night. This morning I did a live show reading the Psalms of Hallel. So if you'd like a good Rosh Hodesh kickoff, I also shared just a short little Torah, so you can see that earlier in the news feed, both Accidental Talmudist and Accidental Talmudist Forum. How are we doing? Are we keeping our spirits up? My pals, we got to keep hope alive, you know? It's a tragic time. There's no question. There's a lot of suffering going on, and we need to be very compassionate with those who have lost and those whose livelihoods are impacted as well. But this is also a time of searching inward, of figuring out how we can do more, do better, be more connected. And there's a lot of beauty and good things going on in the world as well. So let's keep hope alive. And as I said this morning, as we celebrate Rosh Hodesh, 1 billion torches of light from the rooftops. That's how we announced the new month in ancient times, with the signal fires from mountaintop to mountaintop, to announce from Jerusalem all the way out into the diaspora that the new month had arrived. But they said that it looked like the whole diaspora was on fire. Everywhere was a bonfire. How is that possible? Because not only were the signal fires being lit from mountaintop to mountaintop, like that very stirring moment in the Lord of the Rings movie, if you guys saw that and enjoyed it, but also because all the individuals were going up on their rooftops and lighting torches. And so even though everyone was far away and far apart, they all lit up their torches on the same day, on the same night, to celebrate that Rosh Hodesh was arrived, and that we are all one people, bound by the calendar as much as by our hearts. It's our hearts that bind us and make us one, even when we're physically apart. All right, my pals. We are holding by page 49 in Tractate Shabbos, the second tractate of the Talmud. We're in chapter 4. Today we'll finish our discussion of the first Mishnah, and we'll actually wrap up the second Mishnah as well, because it's a short discussion, and then begin our discussion of the third Mishnah in chapter 4 of Tractate Shabbos here on page 49. So let's get right into it. To finish up our discussion of the first Mishnah, we've been talking about what materials may be used to insulate the cooking pot for Shabbos, right? So Friday afternoon, we make a nice hot pot of beautiful cooked meat and food, a stew, if you will, but we're not gonna eat it until much later after it's dark, or perhaps even at lunch on Saturday. And we want that food to stay warm, right? But we can't add heat to the pot. We want to make sure that we don't come to stoke the coals of a fire, or in any way kindle or extinguish flame. So that pot that's already cooked, in ancient times, they would use certain materials to insulate it. One of the questions that comes up in that discussion is, well, depending on what you use, if that material has no other Shabbat use than insulating the pot, so after you remove the pot, right, let's say you take the pot out, you take it to the dining room, and then you want to bring it back, and now those materials that you used to insulate it kind of fell off, can you put them back? And this question isn't only about cooking and insulating. This is actually relating to what we've already been learning about quite a bit, which is muktzeh. Does that material have a purpose on Shabbos other than insulating? If the purpose is insulating, is that enough so that when it's stopped insulating, that we could come back and set it up again? It's not a simple question, because just like this is not a Shabbos candle, it's just our symbolic candle, but if it were Shabbos and I lit that candle for Shabbos, so then for the rest of Shabbos, I cannot move the candle. Its only purpose on Shabbos was to provide the Shabbos light. It is muktzeh otherwise because it's being used for that mitzvah and only that mitzvah. Even after it goes out, I can't touch this candlestick and move it somewhere. So what about these insulating materials around the cookpot? And it comes to depend on, do they have some purpose for Shabbos other than the insulation? So the question came up, are these materials muktzeh? And can we replace them? So in order to understand the answer to that question, the sages raise, what about stuffing from a pillow, right? So you have a pillow, certainly a pillow has a Shabbos purpose, right? You can move the pillow around, you can lean on it, sleep on it, rest on it. Those are all permitted things on Shabbos. What if some stuffing from the inside of the pillow fell out of the pillow? Can you put it back in the pillow? Answer, yes. The pillow is not muktzeh. All the stuff in it is not muktzeh either. If some falls out, you can put it back in. Of course, it's not so simple. There's an exception. If it fell out, you can put it back in. If there's just some stuffing lying around and there's a pillowcase, can you put the stuffing in the pillowcase? Answer, if it's been a pillow before. If that stuffing was in it before, even if it fell out before Shabbos, you can put it back in on Shabbos. But if that pillow has never been a pillow before, meaning that when you put that stuffing into the pillow, it's going to become a pillow for the first time, that you cannot do on Shabbos. What is the forbidden labor? The prohibited labor that we would be violating if we stuff that pillow for the first time? It's an interesting labor. It's one of the 39 labors. And today we're going to actually come to the source of the 39 forbidden labors of Shabbos here on this page 49. But at this point we just say, what is one of those 39 labors, forbidden labors on Shabbos? It's called striking the final blow. It's very interesting. It's its own labor. Striking the final blow is considered its own separate category. That no matter what creative activity you're doing, if you're weaving a rug, or if you're sewing a garment, or if you're, a carpenter and you're putting together a table or a cabinet, or if you're an artist and it's the final brush stroke. The final stroke, the final piece, right? The final bit of labor that completes the creation of some object is its own category of labor, and it's called striking the final blow. And so if this pillowcase it was just a pillowcase and it was stuffing and had never been a stuffed pillow before, you can't stuff it on Shabbos, because then you would come to be performing striking the final blow. Got it? Related question. In the old days, what was a garment? A garment was basically some kind of a poncho, right? Like a rectangular piece of cloth, the fabric with a hole in the middle. You put it over your head. You would cinch it around your belt, right? But that neck opening, often when you send it to the launderer, and he didn't just throw it into a washing machine, right? He was gonna work on a wash tub and scrub it manually, etc. So in order to keep the opening from becoming frayed in the laundering process, they would actually put a few stitches into the neck opening and sew it shut, just for the purposes of laundry. So now you receive that garment back, and of course the garment is not muktzeh. You want to use it on Shabbos. You've already thought in your mind that you would use it on Shabbos. But when the time comes on Shabbos to put on that garment, you discover, the guy doing the laundry put a few stitches in the neck opening. Can I cut those stitches? Like the pillow that has been stuffed before and some stuffing fell out, you can cut those stitches and wear the garment. But like the pillow that was never a pillow before, if this is a new garment that you've never worn before, and it comes with those stitches from the manufacturer as opposed to the launderer, then you may not cut those stitches. Why? striking the final blow. You would be, in essence, completing the manufacture of that garment by cutting out those final stitches. Does this come up in modern life? You're already thinking about it, aren't you? Right? When you buy a new suit, often the pockets, right? Do women's suits come in the same way? Men's suits, if you buy a suit, very often the pockets are sewn shut. It's just the way that they're shipped to the place where you buy the suit. And so when you get home, you don't even think about it. You try on the suit, looks good. And then the first time you're going to use the suit, you put it on, it looks good. You put on your tie, you go to work or you go to synagogue because it's Shabbos. And then you want to put something in your pocket or reach into your pocket for a Kleenex, let's say, and you can't get in the pocket because it's sewn shut. You're like, oh yeah, it's a new suit. Can you cut those stitches? Can you pull out those stitches so you can use the pocket? I'm pretty sure, I haven't actually researched this specific question, but based on what we learned of the neck opening, I'm pretty sure that you cannot cut those stitches, right? Because it's a new suit, and that would be striking the final blow. If for some reason, when you took it to the dry cleaner and they felt that putting a few stitches in the pockets or anywhere else on the suit was going to protect the garment from the dry cleaning process, those stitches you could take out on Shabbos. But the new suit, you can't unstitch the pockets on Shabbos. I'm pretty sure about that by the analogy. Okay, then we come to Mishnah number 2. Here we're learning about more materials that we can use to insulate the pot. These are permitted materials. The first Mishnah was more about prohibited materials, right? That we could not use things like manure or lime or sand or the residue from an olive press because those things have chemical processes inside, some fermentation that causes them to add heat to the pot. Now we're told about some insulating materials that are permitted. They definitely do not add heat to the pot, and they don't create heat even when they're moist, which is another category in Mishnah number 1. So these materials include clothing. You can insulate the pot with clothing. You can insulate with produce, actually like other kinds of food, I guess vegetable produce. Dove's wings. This is so beautiful. Dove's wings. Perhaps they were eating doves and the wings are left over. They're not using living doves to insulate the pot, but dove's wings may be used to insulate the pot, and carpenter's shavings may also be used. And now to understand about dove's wings, we go into a beautiful little digression, a story about Elisha, man of wings. Who was Elisha, man of wings? So Elisha was a pious Jew who lived in Israel during the Roman occupation. And at times, as we've discussed before, the Romans could be very, very cruel in persecuting the Jews. And there were decrees from time to time that were just vicious and meant to put the Jews down and to try to get them to stop practicing Judaism. One such decree was that nobody may use tefillin. If you saw my show this morning, reading the Hallel, I was as part of morning prayer, so I was wearing my talis, my prayer shawl, and my tefillin, also called phylacteries, but who knows that word, phylacteries. Tefillin, and so it's 2 boxes essentially with leather straps. The boxes are also made out of hide, out of cowhide, and inside there are certain passages from the Torah. So the tefillin that is in the Torah, it says that these words, that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and resources, will be a sign. It will be a symbol between your eyes, a sign on your hand, and a symbol between your eyes. So that is the head tefillin. It goes on your forehead, and Romans decreed that anyone wearing tefillin, they would take a stake and put it through your skull. They would kill you, but kill you in such a way that everyone would know that the reason they killed you is because you dared to wear tefillin. Back then, people wore tefillin, religious Jews wore them all day long. Not at night. There's actually a little bit of a discussion here that you shall be clean when you wear tefillin. And what does clean mean? It means one of two things. They kind of argue a little bit. Either it means that you don't wear it at night when you're lying down and you're asleep and you touch yourself and you don't even know what's going on. Or also that while you're wearing tefillin, you don't pass wind. Okay, so that was incidentally in passing. But the point is that Elisha, when the Romans decreed no tefillin, everyone said, it's like a government lockdown. People listened, they were afraid. But Elisha was not going to be deterred. For him, it would dishonor God if he would bow, to this imperial Rome rather than to God. And so he took the risk, knowing that he could be killed for doing it, but he felt that he would be, it was worth it to him to be a martyr if it came to that. So he kept putting on his tefillin, and he even walked around in the marketplace with his tefillin on. We do not recommend this kind of behavior. Remember, life above all things, and you're not required, unless somebody says to you, publicly bow to an idol or commit murder or commit sexual immorality, you'd never have to martyr yourself, right? But in this case, though he could have just kept his tefillin at home, Elisha went out and wore it in the marketplace, and a Roman official saw him. So this Roman official starts coming up to him. Elisha runs away. He knows what's coming. The official chases him. Elisha runs as far as he can. He can't get away. He just whips the tefillin off his head, and it's in his hand. And the Roman official comes running up. He says, "What's in your hand?" And Elisha says, "Dove's wings. The only thing in my hand are dove's wings." The Roman official said, "Open your hands." Elisha opened his hands, and a miracle was performed for him, and the only thing in his hands were dove's wings. The tefillin had been miraculously replaced with the wings of a dove. And so he was saved from that Roman official. He wasn't persecuted. He wasn't killed. A stake was not driven through his skull. And to honor him, that a miracle was performed for him because he was showing his love for God, people called him from then on Elisha, man of wings. Our sages here in the Gemara asked, why particularly did he think to say dove's wings? And why was the miracle performed for him that changed the tefillin into dove's wings? And our sages answer, like a dove are the Jewish people. A dove has no protection other than its wings, right? A dove is, it's the symbol of peace. If a predator goes after a dove, can a dove fight back? Does it have talons that are serious? Does it have a hooked beak that it could really tear into meat like a raptor type of bird? No, it doesn't. The only defense that a dove has is its wings, right? It can fly away. And not especially fast as birds go. It's pretty agile, but it's not the greatest defense. It's the only defense the dove has. How is this likened to the Jewish people? Because we are a small people. We are not a powerful people. We are not a mighty people. We've never been a very populous people. What is it that protects the Jewish people? Mitzvahs. The mitzvahs of the Jewish people, right, fulfilling their obligations as Jews, is the only protection the Jews have, according to the sages of this Gemara. And our mitzvahs, our fulfilling commandments protects us in the way that the wings of a dove protect the dove. Beautiful little story about Elisha, man of wings, which came up because we were talking about the dove's wings may be used to insulate a pot on Shabbos. This brings us to the third Mishnah of chapter 4. We're still talking about insulating a pot. And now the question comes up, what about hides? Hides of an animal. Hides of a cow, hides of a sheep, hides of a goat, etc. May we use animal skins to insulate the cooking pot on Shabbos? So 3 rabbis got together to discuss this question. They were Rabbi Yonasan ben Achinai, Rabbi Yonasan ben Elazar, and Rabbi Hanina bar Hama. And they were going to say, let's figure this out, right? Can we use hides to insulate? The question is a little bit more complicated than it sounds. Yes, for sure, a homeowner, somebody who has hides sitting around his house, can use them to insulate. They don't add over much heat. They don't spontaneously generate heat. And if you wrap the cooking pot in them, and then you take the pot away, and then you want to bring the pot back and wrap it again, you may do that because the hides are not muktzeh. What is the other purpose that the hides have that's prepared for use on Shabbos? You can sit on them, right? The hides are prepared for use as something you can sit on or even serve a meal on. They did that when, they were sort of nomads. The table wasn't a table with like chairs and tables, chair legs and table legs. A table was often a piece of leather that you sat around on the floor, and the table was this piece of leather where you put the food. So you could use the hide of an animal as a table or as the seat, as it were. The interesting question comes up for the craftsman. So if you're a craftsman, like let's say somebody who makes wallets out of leather hides, can you use the leather hides that are in your, in your shop, which is attached to your house, in order to insulate the pot? Is it, and then if you take the pot out, can you wrap those leather hides back on it? Now it's a different question, because whereas the homeowner just has those hides for his use, for his convenience, to use as seats or table covers or whatever he's going to use them for, the craftsman is much more particular about his hides. For him, they're part of his livelihood, and he does not perform his livelihood on Shabbat. So since the expectation is that he wouldn't want his hides used for these ulterior Shabbat purposes, sitting on, eating on, etc., we assume that his hides are not prepared for Shabbos. They would be muktzeh on Shabbos, set aside, you can't touch them. So even if you did, you could wrap the pot in them. When you pull the pot out and this thing fell off, now you can't touch it, pick it up, and wrap it back around the pot. Unless the craftsman designated his hides. Normally I'm particular about my hides, but these hides over here, they're fine to use on Shabbos. Now his intention is different. Now he has, by designation stipulated that they are permitted for use on Shabbos. And so now those hides, even though we wouldn't assume they were available and non-muktzeh, now they are non-muktzeh because of his stipulation. These same rabbis, Rabbi Yonasan ben Achinai, Rabbi Yonasan ben Elazar, and Rabbi Hanina bar Hama, when they were having that conversation about the hides, they were like a little study group, and it was this same group who asked the question, well, we all know that there are 40 minus 1, meaning 39, but it's termed 40 minus 1, categories, or let's say primary categories of forbidden labor on Shabbos. Where do we get this number? To what does this number correspond? How do we know that there are 39 categories of prohibited labor on Shabbos? So Rabbi Hanina bar Hama says, well, these are the labors that we did in the desert, the children of Israel did in the desert, to build the Mishkan, to build the Tabernacle. We've discussed this before. And if you count all of the actual labors that they had to do to build the Mishkan, they would add up to 39. And they're not always obvious. Like we can imagine, okay, they're building a tent in the desert, so there's going to be wooden poles, so I get sawing and hammering, all the construction-related labors. I get it. Those are not going to be part of it. And it's going to be covered in all kinds of fabrics, right? So sewing and dyeing and cutting, measuring, those labors are going to be, I get it, those labors are not going to be there. What about sowing and reaping? Sowing, S-O-W, right? Planting seeds and then harvesting crops. Those definitely sound like labors that we should not be doing on Shabbos. Were those part of building the Mishkan? Well, of course they were, because where did we get those materials that ended up going on the Mishkan? They were made, a lot of them, from linen, right? And so from flax that was grown, and so that flax had to be planted, and eventually it had to be harvested. So yes, that's how they're counted in the 39 categories. And writing, right? People made plans. The guy in charge of the construction, Betzalel, and his buddy Oholiab, when they were getting ready to design and construct the Mishkan, they made plans and drawings and wrote numbers, right? So of course, writing is not going to be part of it either. But is this the only interpretation of where we get the 39 labors? Right, so labor is malacha. That's the word in Hebrew that's in the Bible. And Rabbi Yonasan ben Elazar says, well, actually, the place that we get the 40 minus 1, right, this count of 39, is from the number of times in the Torah that this particular word, melacha, is used in a certain way. If you count them in the Torah, that adds up to 39, and that's how we find this number in the Bible. But Rav Yosef raises an objection. He says, wait a minute. This is a little unclear, because the grammar in the Torah, is often ambiguous, and it's not quite sure. I mean, there's many more than 39 times that this word is used in the Torah, and you're saying it's a particular variation, but according to your count, in the incident of Yosef, right, Joseph, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, remember they sold him into slavery in Egypt. He ended up being purchased by this man Potiphar. Potiphar put Joseph in charge of his household, and then Potiphar's household thrived under the supervision of Joseph, because everything Joseph did was touched by God. He was blessed. And there's this incident where Potiphar comes to trust Joseph more and more and more, and just let him do everything, because everything Joseph does turns into money for Potiphar. So he just gives him the total run of the house. The problem is that Joseph is so handsome that Potiphar's wife gets attracted to him and wants to, have an affair with him. And Joseph says, no, why would I ever do that? My master's been so good to me. The last thing I want to do is sleep with his wife. But she keeps trying and keeps trying to seduce him. And so there's a verse in that story where it says that Joseph comes into the house for his labor. And so some say, well, he just came in to do the work that he needed to do in the house, and that was the moment where she trapped him, tried to, like everyone, the house was empty, she put the full squeeze on him. He said no, she screamed, she accused him of rape, and that's how he ended up in prison, where he would eventually meet, the cupbearer and the baker from Pharaoh's court, interpret their dreams, and that's how he ends up becoming the viceroy of Egypt. But when it says that he came into the house to perform his labor, was he genuinely coming in to do a labor? Or was this a euphemism for coming in to actually commit this foul deed with Potiphar's wife? And some say that he was gonna do it, was ready to do it, but then this image of his father came up before his eyes, and that's where he found the strength to not give into that wicked desire. So now Rav Yosef says, well, what about that use of malacha? Is that in our count? Because if it is, it's going to be 40, not 40 minus 1. And somebody else says, well, there's a similar questionable use with the language also when we talk about that when we were the children of Israel in the desert getting ready to build the tabernacle, people brought all of the materials to the sort of construction site. And was that work or was that preliminary to work? And so this question of the grammatical uses of the word malacha, work, labor in the Torah, it's just hard to make that count and make it stick. So they go back to, no, we have a tradition that the number of labors that went into building the tabernacle are 39. And even though it seems like there's a similar count of the uses of this word in the Torah, our source for understanding that there's 39 categories of forbidden labor is the labors that went into the Mishkan. And the last thing I want to mention is that while we were having this little discussion of what are the 39 prohibited labors here on page 49 in Tractate Shabbos, they were saying that, and that's why transferring from one domain to another is prohibited, because they would take these materials or substances or pieces of the Mishkan when they were traveling from one place to another, and they would load them from the ground into the wagon. And so from a public domain into a private domain. And that's where we learn that transfer from a public domain to a private domain or private domain to public domain is one of those prohibited labors on Shabbos. And a couple times as I've been teaching you, the question came up, can you transfer from private domain to private domain? Let's say from inside your house to your yard, or from your yard to your neighbor's yard. Can you make that transfer? Can you hand something sort of over the property line to your neighbor on Shabbos? And here it gets answered, you can transfer from private domain to private domain unless you pass through the public domain in order to get there. If you're going from private to private, then that would be a prohibited transfer. So it was nice to just see that, since it was a question that had come up and I was a little uncertain, and now it's resolved. That's what I've got for us for today. Very excited that it's a good Hodesh Tov, Rosh Hodesh, bringing in the new Hebrew month of Iyar, Shabbos coming in tonight. I'll just wait here for a moment to see if there's any questions, and remind you that this Sunday at noon Pacific, 3 o'clock Eastern, 10 p.m. Israel, 8 p.m. London, we're going to be doing our first Accidental Talmudist Zoom forum. So we'd love to see you there. No agenda. The purpose is just to get to know each other, have a l'chaim. You've heard me talking plenty. I'd like to see your faces, hear your voices. So would love to see you on Sunday at noon Pacific in the Zoom room. The Zoom meeting ID is published in the Accidental Talmudist forum. We also sent it out in the email, and we'll send out a reminder email. If you're not on the email list, just go to accidentaltalmudist.org and sign up for the email. All right, my friends, sending you big, big love, that you should have a great Shabbos and a great new month. All the best.